very special commitment with the great master Thích Giác Đức to share his memory with his teacher, his master.
Namo Benshur Suja Monifo, Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Venerable members of the Sangha, the family of Thích Giác Đức, and the friends and disciples of Venerable Thích Giác Đức. First, I want to offer my condolence to the family, friends, and disciples of the late Thích Giác Đức, and to express how it's a great privilege for me to be here today. I've been a Buddhist monk now for 58 years, and the person who set me on the path of a Buddhist monk was none other than the Venerable Thích Giác Đức. So how did that happen? In 1966, I came to Claremont Graduate University to start a program, a PhD program in philosophy. I was already interested in Buddhism, which I started to read about in college, and I even tried to meditate on my own, but I soon gave up because I didn't really know how to go about it without any guidance. At the beginning of my second semester at Claremont in February '67, one day in the graduate residence hall, I looked up and I saw a brown-robed man walking through the residence hall. And that man I could identify as a Buddhist monk, and somebody later told me that he was from Vietnam. And I later learned that his name was Thích Giác Đức. A few days later, some of my fellow graduate students invited me to a gathering on Mount Bodhi, which is a large mountain near Claremont. And when I went there, I saw that that Vietnamese monk also had joined that gathering on Mount Bodhi. Even though I hadn't spoken to him before, he came up to me and he told me that we had a lot in common, and he said that he felt that there was some kind of special connection between us. He even said that he thought that I had the ability to understand Buddhism. And this struck me as very strange, even puzzling, because it seemed he had no way of knowing that I was already interested in the Dharma. But I told him that I wanted to learn more about Buddhism, and particularly that I was interested in learning how to meditate. And he told me that he would be able to teach me, and we made an appointment for me to visit him in his room at the graduate residence hall. And so one day, later that week, I came to his room, and he gave me my first instructions in meditation, basically teaching me how to do the mindfulness of breathing. And then I started to practice on my own, and then I would visit him from time to time to report about my practice. And on these occasions, he would also teach me more about the Dharma. As I experienced the benefits of meditation, my confidence in the teaching of the Buddha increased, even to the point where 2 months later, I think it was in April 1967, I asked him whether he would be able to ordain me as a monk. And he said that he could do so, but he would have to get permission from the authorities in Saigon. And so he wrote back to the authorities, the Sangha Council, and they gave him permission to ordain me. And when I look back at this time, it seems almost like a crazy thought that had come into my mind. Since I was only 22 years old, I had been practicing meditation for just 2 months, and I had no idea of what being a Buddhist monk would involve. But somehow I think Venerable Thích Giác Đức had some insight into my character, and maybe he had seen that we had some kind of karmic connection from a past life. In any case, he arranged the ordination to take place on the Vesak day of 1967. That was May 23rd in a Japanese Buddhist temple in Los Angeles. In the fall of 1967, Thay and I moved to a small house in the town of Claremont, and then a mutual friend of ours, Con Hickey, who is here today, came to join us in preparing meals, and another graduate student at Claremont, a Japanese Buddhist priest named Tatsu Manito, also came to join us. And so for the next few years, every evening the four of us had dinner together. We would take turns preparing the meal, and in that task, Thay, Thích Giác Đức, excelled. He was really an excellent cook. Also a very skilled carpenter. He could make changes to the building just in the snap of a finger, and also he was very skilled with electrical equipment. And so I continued to live with Thay for the next 3 years, as long as he was at Claremont, until he completed his PhD and then returned to Vietnam in the spring of 1970. Through Venerable Thích Giác Đức, I learned not only the theory and practice of Buddhism, but I also learned about the struggles of Vietnamese Buddhists. I learned how Buddhism in Vietnam had been ruthlessly suppressed by the regime of Ngo Dinh Diem, how Thay himself had been imprisoned and beaten and tortured in prison, and how Vietnamese Buddhist monks and nuns would set themselves on fire in order to protect the Dharma. Thay presented to me the vision of an actively engaged form of Buddhism, devoted not only to personal enlightenment, but also to social transformation based on the Buddhist values of compassion and human dignity. During the time we lived together, Thay would discuss with me his plans for my future as a Buddhist monk. Originally, he thought that I should go to India to study, but then later he thought that it would be better for me to go to Sri Lanka. So after he returned to Vietnam, I was living in Los Angeles, and I met several Sri Lankan Buddhist monks, and one of them, this was the Venerable Piyadasi, connected me to an elder Sri Lankan monk named the Venerable Balangoda Ananda Maitreya, the Mahanayaka Thero, or chief prelate of the Amarapura Nikaya, and in that way I came to Sri Lanka, and the Venerable Ananda Maitreya reordained me into the Theravada order and became my first Theravadan Buddhist teacher. While I was en route to Sri Lanka, I stopped in Vietnam for 2 months. This was in August 1972. At that time, Thay was at the Jack Ming Pagoda in Saigon, and our mutual friend Con Hickey was also living in Saigon, where he was studying Vietnamese Buddhism for his PhD dissertation at Claremont. I left Vietnam in October 1972, and then I arrived in Sri Lanka, and then I ordained into the Theravada order, first as a novice in November 1972, and then I took the full ordination, Bhikkhu ordination, in 1973. After I spent 3 years in Sri Lanka, I thought of going back to Vietnam to pay a visit to Thay, and so I came to India first, but then in April 1975, Vietnam fell to the communists, and Thay left Vietnam to go to the United States. And so then I returned to Sri Lanka, where I remained for the next 2 years. And then in 1982, I went back to Sri Lanka, and I spent the next 20 years in Sri Lanka until 2002. Through all these years, I've always been grateful to Venerable Thích Giác Đức as the person who set me on the path of a Buddhist monk. If I did not meet Thay, who knows what my destiny would have been. Perhaps I would have become a professor of Western philosophy or gone into some other field. But it was my great good fortune that I have walked the path of a Buddhist monk now for 58 years, and it was my encounter with Thích Giác Đức at Claremont that set me in this direction. This year, the leaders of the Bangladeshi Buddhist Fellowship or Federation, which is based in Boston, invited me to their annual gathering, which was to take place on September 1st. And I thought that when I was coming up here, that it would be good for me to stop off at Newton to visit Thay and Zoom in their home in Newton. And so on August 31st, I visited Thay and Zoom, and it was a very joyful meeting. And Thay had just turned 90 just a couple of weeks earlier, and he seemed to be in reasonably good health and bright spirits, and we were both very, very happy to see each other again. Thay even told me that my visit brought tears of joy to his eyes. I thought that we would have the chance to meet again many times in the future. Sadly, however, this was not to be the case. In the middle of October, Khan Hickey informed me that Thay had a heart attack and was in a hospital in Boston. And so as soon as I could wind up matters at the monastery, I came to Boston to see Thay, and it was a great blessing that I could be with him during his last week in this world. Even though he couldn't open his eyes or speak, I think he understood me when I told him how grateful I was for our friendship and for his influence on my life. It seemed to me that this last week we spent together, along with Khan Hickey, completed the circle that had started 58 years earlier in Claremont. In 1967, the three of us spent time together each evening, and now we spent that last week in his room at the hospital. I certainly don't think that Thay's passing means the end of our relationship. Thay lives on in my mind and my heart. He inspired in me the idea that the purpose of following the Buddhist path is not only to seek one's own individual liberation, but to work to create a better world, a world of peace, justice, and dignity for everyone. He always emphasized the importance of putting others before oneself, and he himself exemplified this in action, embodying the spirit of the Bodhisattva. And this goal continues to inspire my own life as a monk, especially at the present time when people around the world, even right here in the United States, are facing so many challenges and so much pain. Even though I don't have memories of any past lives, I strongly believe that Thay and I must have had a close karmic connection, going back over previous lives. I also believe that in time, as the wheel of birth and death turns, we'll meet again in the future and again walk the Buddha's path together, hand in hand. And I want to conclude just by reciting a little blessing for Thai family and friends in the ancient Pali language. Bhavatu sabba mangalam, rakhantu sabba devata, sabba buddhanu bhavena, sada soti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sabba mangalam, rakhantu sabba devata, sabba dhammanu bhavena, sada soti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sabba mangalam, rakhantu sabba devata, sabba samghanu bhavena, sada soti bhavantu te. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your moving story related to the most honorable, the Master Giác Đức. Con xin được tóm tắt lời của ngài Bodhi, tỳ kheo Bodhi và hòa thượng và pháp sư Giác Đức cùng học ở trường Grad School hậu đại học chương trình tiến sĩ vào khoảng năm 1966 1968, và ngài đã gặp nhau nơi đó, và trong cái cuộc gặp gỡ tại Bodhi Mount, núi Bodhi.